Good morning, everybody. Slash afternoon slash evening based on attendance. How you doing? Europe. Can y'all hear me?
I can hear you,
Yeah, we
James.
can hear you.
There we go. Fantastic. Thanks for waiting up. We had apparently a reservation problem. Where are you guys? In A-Track is where it is today?
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
Where
Well,
are
I
you?
guess I can go over. I guess I can go over there. You got VC in there, obviously. But I am guest host, so I'm just going to camp out here because Outlook fails me repeatedly. It's Outlook's fault, not mine. How are you guys over there across the office?
Lonely.
Hello.
Yeah, it's been a long week, and we have a fairly short update because Andrew Wilcox is out. Eric Irway is in Chile, although he's going to be attending. He's a little bit late on this call because he's got another update to do. Um, and so I am, as Eric so oddly described it, your guest host. I don't know. I feel like I'm a part of the picture on a general, unusual basis, right? I think so. But for my purposes anyway, I think we have three things to discuss. One of them is the recent merges into the mainline develop. One of them is our intention ultimately to do a major release rather than a minor or patch release, given the substance of the changes to the core repository. And another one is just in general aligning on priorities for Q3 and Q4 and putting together just a sort of top priority list and making sure that the folks here who commit so much time and energy to our project feel pretty much in agreement on it. So I'm leaving all those. Is there just off of the cuff any additional stuff? Mr. Kalkman wants to do some docs coverage or Dev, do you want to do? Hello, Dev. Do you want to do any QA updates?
Yeah, I have some CI/CD updates.
CI/CD updates as well. Okay, fantastic. So why don't we here? Hold on a minute. All right. Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen if y'all give me just a minute. Can you guys see my screen?
Got it.
Uh, okay, can you see that now?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, everybody, recently closed tickets include some fairly large ones, including this don't merge. I hope that we didn't merge this.
No.
My name is on a couple of these, so obviously I know some details, but let's not start with mine. Let's start with sort of a follow-up to the merge of the repository that we carried off so successfully last week, probably mostly because I wasn't super involved. I have Andy Terranova and the rest of the team to thank for that, but I wanted to call out Andy specifically because he did so much organizational work and stepped up to do it. But we have had a fairly smooth transition. But nevertheless, there probably will still be some trailing issues to update, and there were last week, including just changing Magento research to Magento and a bunch of text files and markdown files. So though we have a trailing issue that we closed to make sure that the move to the Magento organization is done and that any integrations that did not survive the transfer are at least being worked on. So among those, trailing that wasn't working for a while was coveralls, but we actually have that working again, as you can see from the closure and merging of this PR. So that is more of an ops and repository move issue, but maybe the thing that leads us into the second big subject about issuing a major release is that we have merged additional API and major API changes. The CIC PR update I'm going to leave to Dev because that's also really important for community. But this is a fairly major merge, and I demonstrated a little bit of it last week, so I won't go into a lot of detail. But the important thing is that there is now a new configuration API for BuildPack to create a Webpack config. This is sort of draft documentation in the pull request, but this is a major change because it resulted in the major configuration file for Venia changing a lot. Instead of having a whole lot of inline hard-coded configuration value, it now has, now that we're merged into develop, it now has shrunk down to 50 lines. And this is because a lot of what you used to see in this large complex Webpack config has been abstracted into a configure Webpack function. This is documented currently. Part of the merge into master was approved by docs and includes a draft document describing the configure Webpack function. It's not yet merged in and fully edited, but it is present here in the drafts configure Webpack with a full description and declaration of API and its purpose. Upcoming pull requests are going to take advantage of this functionality and the merging of upward files that it enables and the collection and inclusion into the build of GraphQL queries and other static assets. I think you're going to like it. But this constitutes a major change. And hilariously, all of my PRs were called V4 PRs because I forgot that we were already on 4. But you're not going to see this stuff get released onto NPM and into the major package without going to a full major release, 5.0.0. And that means some migration burden, but it's a lot better than the alternative, which is breaking you with a patch or a minor update. So we're going to try to be very hands-on and very present in the community chats, et cetera, to help you guys with this transition. But it's going to lead the way to extensibility, and we're super excited about it. So that's the reason for a 5.0 release. I think you can see that our release cadence is still fairly nimble. Release 3.0 came out most recently, and then before then was release 2.1 and 2.0. We don't have a very conservative approach to doing major releases. And as hopefully most of us know and remember, these releases are not specifically connected to releases of the Magento product. We do guarantee compatibility with current releases of the Magento open source product and the enterprise product, but PWA Studio is a separate piece of software, and our major versioning scheme is just for that. It's not supposed to coincide with regular Magento. So those are the first two agenda items, and the third one is something I don't have collateral built for, but we have a general issue where we want to make sure that the folks who are adopting PWA Studio get their questions and their concerns seen to. We've had a lot of questions about localization and internationalization. We've had a lot of questions about proper deployment characteristics and having better documentation for that deployment. And finding the epic, or maybe that's over here. Maybe we call that an epic over here. But maybe most importantly, uh-oh. We have apparently not marked that story as an epic, but give me just a moment and I will find it. Yeah. We have heard from a couple of pieces of feedback that our SSR story is not sophisticated enough. It certainly has some layers of complexity, and we're going to pare those down for rendering to the major clients, but the current static render philosophy is to render the page via Upward, via mustache template resolution to all browsers. And for many years, this was the right thing to do, and you don't detect browsers and deliver different bundles based on them or different assets based on them. But we've had it clarified for us directly from the people who run the search engines that what's important is not to keep the actual code the same, but to keep all the content the same, and then you don't get penalized no matter what you deliver it to. So in order to speed up our render for actual devices, that is human beings looking at a screen, maybe it's a desktop computer, maybe it's a phone, we'd like to research switching from partial SSR to zero SSR. The SEO concerns, as we've said, they aren't a big deal because this is an endorsed approach from the major consumer of search engine optimization, Google themselves. And the speed concern, I think, is something we have to see from our research spike. If it turns out to not be faster, we'll figure out why, but the whole point of it is to render faster. So we want to at least test switching from rendering HTML as an application shell out of Upward itself and into pre-compiling the HTML shell and then delivering that statically to get to the first render that much faster. We haven't yet prioritized and assigned this task. It's still kind of ready for grooming, but this is something that's on our radar as the next kind of major technical change to the way that we render. And it is directly in service of shaving seconds off of the first render, so we think people will be fairly pleased with it. But the floor is open for folks to take on some of the recommendations in this story and to experiment with them, maybe use the HTML Webpack plugin, kind of you name it. There are a couple of other initiatives. I have talked enough, and I promised it was going to be a light day. So, Dev, are you ready to talk about CI/CD stuff?
Yep.
Okay, well, I will stop sharing. Thank you, folks. And we'll do questions at the end because there's so much probably to ask about, and I want to give Dev the chance to share.
Okay, so coming to CI/CD updates, like we have 3 updates. First one is about build deployment. So previously we had like pull request build and pull request test, and we never had deploy build on AWS. So now we have set it up, and you can access storefront on AWS instance now with URL would be like this is the static part of it, and the changing part would be the PR number.
That is huge. That's actually way better and more useful of a URL than we were getting from the auto deploy through now.
Yeah, and the second update is about the danger PR template errors. So like in PR template, if you have any description or verification steps missing, so currently danger throws these errors, and even if you update it, these errors don't go away until the next push. But
Yeah.
now we have set up a nightly build which runs like around 8 p.m. CST, which basically runs the PWA test build, and as part of this, if those changes are identified, so that these errors will go away. And also, like we are still tracking it, and in like next 1 week or 2, we will remove this message now.
Okay, that's fantastic. Oh, now is the time for me to leave this room that I'm squatting in. If the meeting ends, Dev, just rejoin it and you'll be host.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
And the third one is like still in progress. So currently, what I do, like whenever a ticket comes in QA, I run all the MFTF tests like locally or on Docker container. But now we are setting it up to run on every pull request. So whenever a pull request is created, all the MFTF tests will run. So that's still in QA, will be done like in a day or 2. Those are the updates I have for CI/CD. James, you want to take over?
Are you talking to me, Dev, or is that Lynn?
You.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I don't have a whole lot of updates docs wise. I've been mostly working on an architectural overview of how storefront connects to Magento. I can probably share that screen. Where's that one?
Sorry, folks. I blamed Outlook already, right?
Can you guys see my screen? Should be there.
Yes, we are, sir.
Yep. So this is a draft I have. I'm still working on it, but I'd love to get some feedback on the content that I've pushed up already. James, I know you probably have some things you want to add to some of these topics. Headless architecture and Magento's microservices, things like that. So yeah, just comment on this draft PR, and I'll keep on working on it. That's all from my side.
All right. So you've gone, and thank you so much. And you've gone as well. I got kicked out of the room I was in, but I wanted to say real fast that if you don't want to wait for the nightly build, great as it is to have, because I think a lot of people just didn't know what was going on. So thank you for that. If you don't want to wait for the nightly build, you can create an empty commit with a flag on the Git command line, and you can push that empty commit. Try to avoid doing that. Because that messes things up pretty bad, but it is something. So
yeah, and also I one thing to it, like as part of nightly build, we are also clearing of AWS unused resources.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the one reason.
Yeah. So the nightly build does a lot of important things, but it doesn't stop the nightly build. It just lets you at least refresh the danger PR check. So that's good. Okay, we have a few sort of possible locations for questions here, and we got some stuff in the chat. David's asked a question that I think Jimmy's handled already. Yeah, and David, that's something we talk about offline, because you've brought a perspective to light on that I think is important to address. But you and I should talk about that in more detail. Does anyone on the call have questions or wants to volunteer their own update, or just have general comments to make? No? Oh, one more second. No, that's it. Okay, thank you very much, everybody, and have a good weekend. As we say at the end of every stand-up, onward and upward. And we'll keep in touch. Take it easy, guys.